demonia. Use my fangs to murder ya. Yo soy la diosa, los demonios no me controlan. Soy culebra.
All right, everybody, what's up? 7 Octoberz. Welcome to my podcast, Nightmare on Sedgwick Avenue. We're in season 4, episode 10, so we're at the end. I'll probably do a recap episode after this one, but I really have a really great guest that I've been trying to get on the show. He's a film programmer and editor. He's a programmer of Mexico Maleficarum. I probably butchered that, but we'll go into that in a little bit when I get him on the screen here. And then he's also an instructor for Miskatonic Institute of Horror Studies, so that's really interesting. He's all about like cinema, and especially he specializes in Mexican cinema, which we'll get into that in a second. But without further ado, he goes by Aullidos Panteoneros, aka Abraham Castillo Flores. Hello, Abraham.
Hola, how are you? It's a pleasure to be with you. And as you said, thank you. We've been playing cat and mouse to get in touch, so I'm very happy that we're having this conversation.
Yeah, thank you. And obviously I gave your intro, but is there anything I missed or anything that you want to introduce yourself as well, like anything that you want to share with the listeners and the viewers about yourself?
I think you said it very well. I like to call myself a preacher of freaky cinema.
Oh, yes.
Which is my preferred mode of explaining what I do. But yes, also I have a deep reverence and mission to promote Mexican horror cinema and fantasy cinema throughout the world, which I think needs a bit more love. And yes. There's treasures to be discovered. And, films are not happy to be in vaults and archives. They need to go out and like show their magic. So that's what I'm all about.
That's cool. And how did you get into, let's start from the beginning. Like, how did you get into film and cinema and all that stuff?
Well, my father had this thing when I was very little. He would like to go to matinees, and he would always bring me. And I was usually probably watching stuff I should not be watching. So I remember I was very scared of certain movies, or I got very tense. He really liked some karate and action stuff that was very bloody from Hong Kong. And I remember being like, oh my God, and being a bit scared, but also, I really liked it after a while. Yeah. I got obsessed with that. Then my grandmother was obsessed with like legends, and she showed me Macario when I was very young. And
oh yeah, that's a good film.
That did it. Macario really kind of opened the doors. But then also for a time I was not as keen and in love with Mexican cinema, because I actually kind of looked at all the bad special effects, or I was looking at the stuff that has made it infamous.
Yes.
And it took me a while to come back. Realize how important it is to watch how all these people made majestic films and wonderful cinematic experiences with what they had. And that started to like really, grow on me. And I decided that it was very important to not only chart that history, but also to share it, because, Mexican cinema has been getting a bigger reputation as the years go by, and we have incredible filmmakers that are now in the in the international arena, and they have incredible stuff. But this comes back. These people did not come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And I'm obsessed with like tracking down the history of our films, not only for myself but also because I want to share that information so it doesn't just stay in books. And I also thought it was important to get a perspective from someone who's from Mexico. Because there are incredible scholars from the U.S. that have been giving love to Mexican cinema and for a while, and they're amazing, and I think their work is super important. But I thought I could also give my take.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty cool. And I like the fact that, like you said, Mexican cinema, there's a lot of like obscure films, or like just films that a lot of people haven't seen, or are like aware of them. So it's kind of cool that you're bringing light to them. And that kind of leads me to like the Mexico how do you even say it? Maleficarum? Maleficarum. How did that start, and what was like your intention when you started that, and what has it become now?
Well, that was a beautiful and incredible, how would I say, like the planets aligned somehow. As you know, I've given talks about Mexican cinema, both in the States and in Canada. And I'm currently working on a book, so I have this whole thing about promoting Mexican horror cinema. But then at one point, the Academy Museum reached out and they told me that they were very interested in Mexican horror cinema, and they wanted to see if we could work, collaborate on a series. I, of course, got ultra excited because, bringing these magical films to that space, which is not only open to the history of cinema, but the definition of what cinema is right now, I thought it was incredible. So I, of course, jumped at the opportunity, and we collaborated to create this series where we could honor these films, their filmmakers, the actors, but also try to group them on a new viewpoint. To me, it was very important that we saw movies that were about, the occult, this idea with the devil, being that we're such a Catholic country, it has like a flip side, and I was very interested on that, on like the B side. How does a Catholic country with where there were censorship ideas, you can do certain things, how did all these anxieties about what lies beyond death, and what is the dark side, or the devil, how do we portray it, and how we've been doing that through the years? And that was very important. And also to take a step away from luchador movies. Not because I don't like them, but because I think they have such an incredible popularity. I don't think they need more help. No, they have a power and a might of their own. And I was interested also for American audiences to realize and consider that there was a lot of genre and horror pictures that went beyond the luchadores. We only, of the 20 films, we only had one that had luchadores, which I think are important and a pillar, definitely. But I thought it was important to branch out.
Yes, that's really good. And how do you get like the actors? Because I know you had a few that you had there that you got to interview, which was really cool. How do you get those people, or do you have like connections, or how did that work?
One of the interesting things of programming movies is that you end up without kind of, it's not in the job description, but you end up learning a lot of detective stuff. You have to like not only be curious, to be persistent, and to be looking, and you kind of have a network of people, you start asking around, and then you have to do tons of internet searches, tons of emails that go unanswered, and then you go and do it again and again until someone answers. A little bit about that, I'm sure.
Yes.
So it was kind of like, from the resources I had, asking, and then also until somebody was like, okay, we need to answer this gentleman because he's going to keep bugging us.
Yeah.
Which I'm very good at.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And I know this year you had like a few, I think you had a Lucarda. I saw I forget this one, the hadas. I forget what is the veneno de hadas.
Veneno para las hadas.
Veneno para las hadas. Yes. So you had like a good lineup, and I think you had some of the I think for Alucarda, or I forgot which film it was. You had one of the actresses. She's like she's in novelas.
For example, for that, sorry that I interrupt. For example, we had Rosita Arenas from A Witch's Mirror. And who also, apart from being incredible in that film and in La Maldición de la Llorona, she was married to Abel Salazar, the gentleman who was the producer and actor and kind of the the motor behind this renaissance of horror that came up in Mexico in the 60s. Throughout his company, APSA Films, he did 8 horror films that were very important. But starting with El Vampiro, he was the first one to really make a hit, a horror, something that showed that they had to do horror. And after that, a lot of other producers started to wake up to the possibilities. So it's very important on that not only historically, but as in the part of the industry. And Rosita Arenas was right there, so it was very important that we could talk to her and kind of honor her legacy. She's 89 years old, and she's in great shape. She's an incredible lady, so smart, elegant, beautiful. She has incredible recollections, and also the elegance and she's a star. You talk to these people and you realize, okay, this is a star. She was on screen with Pedro Infante, Luis Aguilar, top people of her era.
Yeah.
And I remember that at some point, I was kind of trying to see if like she wanted to have some stories or certain she could have like something juicy, and she was like, no. It's like, you don't understand. I love everybody I've ever worked with, and I only have good things to say about everything. It's a magical thing, and I really learned a lot, and she was so generous with her experiences that to me was beautiful. It was definitely one of the highlights. But then again, for example, you said about the other guests. At the middle of Mexico Malificarum, I had the incredible chance to talk to a woman that not only do I admire, but I think she's a phenomenal actress, Miss Blanca Guerra from Santa Sangre.
Yes, okay.
I think,
that's what I was talking about. Yeah, I saw her.
Concha, Santa Sangre. I was transfixed, and I was like so happy that a Mexican actress in a Jodorowsky movie and doing such a crazy, gutsy role where not only the passions and excesses of the Jodorowsky universe come in full mode, but also she shows that she's a power to deal with, and she kind of channels this idea of the bad mother of the fear of the feminine in a way that I don't think anybody has done. Which is amazing.
Yeah,
and then in the last exactly. And then in the last part of Mexico Malificarum, we had Shaula Vega, the daughter of Isela Vega, the director, co-writer and producer of the film, join us to give a lecture because, as people know, or maybe they don't know, Miss Isela Vega, who wrote, directed, and produced The Lovers of the Lord of the Night, which is the first folk horror film directed by a woman in Mexico.
Oh wow!
She's no longer with us. She passed away in 2020, but we had her daughter join us to celebrate the movie.
Okay, that's pretty cool. I haven't seen that one. I need to check it out then. I saw it on the...
Yeah, well, that's one of the ones we're working on to get more, because that film was actually, it was not lost. It was in a vault. It hadn't been touched since 1986. Oh, wow. And one of the beautiful things that Mexico Maleficarum allowed me was to do the detective work, to find not only a print, but to figure out all the legal entanglements that it had, so we could use it. And it was quite an adventure that is still ongoing.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, what I want to see, because I grew up in like the 80s, so like I'm like a fan of like the 80s Mexican horror. But one thing I like miss was Ernesto Alonso, who had one of the first supernatural like novelas, like El Maleficio. Like that needs to get out of the vault, because I'm like, I never watched it. Only watched clips on YouTube.
I am so happy you brought Mr. Alonso into the mix. Let us take a moment to talk about this wonderful man, because I don't know if your audience is well aware of him. Mr. Ernesto Alonso, better known as Mr. Telenovela, was a film actor. Started as a really cool film actor from the 40s and the 50s. Yeah. Then in the late 50s, he did also incredible films. He has one of if people have not watched The Criminal Life of Archibaldo de la Cruz, you have to watch that. Ensayo de un Crimen, it's called in Spanish. And it's the story of a serial killer, but in his mind, he's always thinking about how he's going to kill people around him, but he doesn't kill them. So the film goes into this dichotomy of what is going on in his mind and how he's preparing to kill someone, but then something happens and he's not able to. And it's delightful. And it's a kinky film, very kinky, for its time as well, and imaginative and perverse, wonderful film. Yeah. And then at some point he went into television, and he became like the most important producer of telenovelas, but he loved genre. And he made the first horror telenovela in 1962 for the Mummies of Guanajuato.
I forgot about that.
They made a telenovela out of that, and in a studio they would like make these mummies, and every episode they would like zoom into the mummy, and then they would tell the story of 100 years ago, this blah 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 happened until they died, and the next chapter would be that. And that was 62. And then in 1980 he made El Maleficio, which is the telenovela you're talking about, which is, this guy was supposed to be Enrique de Martino, who's an industrialist in Mexico, but he was the head of the mafia, the New York mafia in Mexico. And he of course had dealt dealings with the devil, and he had a picture, Bael, in his office, where he would do like dark rites and everything. And this was on open television, 8 o'clock.
Yeah, that's what was weird.
on Channel 2. Oh no, it was, and he had like white magic were the enemies. There was like an Indian, like an indigenous woman
Yeah.
that used to be his first wife
Oh
because
wow.
they had a son, of course.
Yeah.
And you would
Oh,
see
that's
her
true.
with like
That's
all
true.
the indigenous drove. That it was incredible and scary. Like for me, it was scary as hell. It had it had a ghost child, a dog that would a black dog that would appear,
Yeah.
and only the people that were being chased by the devil or the enemies would see them. Um, it had all this crazy stuff. It was incredible, and you could watch it on open television.
That was really cool. Yeah, it always
That
reminded
was
me like this.
Ernesto.
The story reminded me of like Dorian Gray, like the Mexican version with the picture and everything, like the devil pact and everything. I was like, it was really good. It was
No,
really
and he had this. No, he was a suave man. Big mustache, and he had like these silk robes, very elegant.
Yeah.
Lots of luxury. And the 80s at that point in Mexico, we were in a deep economic crisis. And the idea that this man was like in cahoots with the devil and he was like perverting all the people around him. And, his first wife first wife was his enemy, the indigenous woman. Then the next wife was an alcoholic because she couldn't deal with like dealing with this guy. And then the third wife, which is the one stories like we see how her kids are slowly perverted into the dark side, and she's trying to bring the family, out from his grips, and it was delightful. And his life. If somebody made a biopic of his life, I mean, there's tons of legal stuff where they probably haven't done it, but his life is like incredible.
Really interesting.
Incredible.
Yeah. Rest in peace to him. Yeah, he was a legend.
Oh yes, Viva Ernesto Alonso.
Yes. And what would you say is your like favorite like Mexican horror film? Since we're talking about horror in specific, what would be your favorite?
It's very hard. It's very hard.
Or top 5.
I mean, there's so many, but I would have to say, for example, from the Mexico Maleficaron section, I would say so hard. But for example, there's one called The Black Pit of Dr. M, Misterios de Ultratumba, which is basically, it's a ghost movie. But I think it's one of the best ghost movies ever because it is so dark and it goes so intense. And it's this idea of two doctors. They're working in an insane asylum, and they make a gentleman's pact, which is the first one who dies needs to come back from the underworld to tell the other what's beyond that.
Oh wow!
And that's like the motor. That's the starting point of the movie. And she goes just to get this knowledge, which men should not know. Everything goes dark, everything goes terribly wrong, and it's delightful and it's perverse and it's dark. And it's from the same gentleman that did El Vampiro, Fernando Mendes, which is one of our patron saints of genre. And for some reason, that movie doesn't get the recognition that The Vampire does. And that one is like amazing. At the same time, for example, films like El Espejo de la Bruja, The Witch's Mirror, which is like it's so bonkers and it mixes so many things and it just does it with a glee and a passion that is incredible. But I can go on, for example, Alucarda as well. I mean, Alucarda, it's such an important development of Mexican cinema, the excesses it goes, and just design-wise, and it breaks so many taboos, and it kind of killed the career of the director, but it also cemented his legacy. And because no one has, I don't think Mexican cinema has reached those heights in terms of doing an exploitation satanic movie. And wherever you put it, and I hadn't watched it in the theater, I have to say. And watching it in the Academy Museum big, once again, was incredible and majestic. And you can see that the man and all the people behind it really hit on a nerve and hit on something very special.
Yeah.
But there's tons, and see, that's the beauty. You start discovering, and one of the things that I like the most is I have like my set of things that I like and my preferences. But you start digging, or you start rewatching stuff, and then you put it in context, and you realize, whoa, this person did something that nobody had tried before, or they are doing this, and it connects to other stuff. So my list keeps changing all the time. For example, there's a movie that couldn't be with us called La Cabeza Viviente, The Living Head, which is the story of a beheaded Aztec general.
Oh yeah, I remember that one.
Back to life, and he has like his enforcer who's like carrying the head, and they're trying to track down all the archaeologists, the scientists that open up the tomb. And it's bonkers crazy, but also this idea of using like the Aztec mythology, even if it's not historically correct, but using that in the context of a horror movie, I think it's masterful and beautiful. And also using our Hispanic past for horror stories, I think it's fantastic, and it's like something. It's kind of obvious, but for some reason, not so many people do it. And in literature, I have to say, these days there's an incredible author called Bernardo Esquinja who's been doing it more and more and more. They even did recently a TV series from one of his books called Toda la Sangre. But it's that guy is like, he's definitely into something that he really tapped into that, and there's so many stories that they could bring from that. It's just our past is so rich in excesses, in horror, dark stories that from wherever you can, you turn the stone and there's a story. And also with the present in Mexico, which is so dark and horrible. And I mean this in the not in a horror. No, it's like horrible. Like the drug thing here is like crazy, drug wars. But there are also you touch on that, and there's so many spooky stories that also comment from where we are right now and how things got so fucked up. We can I say that or no?
Yeah, no, you're fine.
Okay. So yes, sorry, I kind of got carried away as I told you.
No, you're good. And I like that. And I was gonna say too, like, what are your thoughts on like, because we talk about horror, but there's also like this subgenres too, like there are in the U.S. Like for me, I love horror comedy. Like for you, what are your thoughts on the horror comedy? Like for example, like Ermelinda, Capulina, like back in the 60s, 70s. Like, what are your thoughts on those films?
I think they're delightful. I think they really nailed this idea of going bonkers and like the excess of like, okay, we have these horror tropes, let's turn them around. And yes, they are ridiculous. Yes, they are super silly.
Yeah.
And I mean, I have to say, at some point at the beginning, I was very, oh no, that's bad. That's like very trashy. But then you realize that but people forget the importance of making people laugh and making people afraid are basically kind of the same thing, because comedy and horror, I think, are the only genres that when they work, your body reacts. Like you burst out laughing. You cannot control a laugh. The same as when you're like scared and you're like, your back of your hair start, or like you get scared, or you want to close your eyes. You don't control that. And I think that's beautiful. And when a film or whichever narrative makes you do that, it's magical. It's fantastic. It's like the best things about cinema, because it's working and you cannot control your response to that. And comedies and horror do that. And going back, Hermelinda, Capulina, but also the Pepito and Chabelo contra los monstruos. That kind of, it's delightful, and it's also like exactly Chiqui Dracula as well, for example. No, like who would imagine? Well, here we do. No, of course, no. Aquí los mexicanos, we turn it around, and things that could not be fun or should not go. And I have to say, it's not that we discovered it. I mean, for example, in the States, Abbott and Costello are kind of, the firm ambassadors of that kind of comedy. But it brings families into cinema, because it's very important. The children audience is very important. And you have to, when you're a child, you kind of like the scary stuff, but it needs to be in certain. You cannot go all the way crazy. You cannot go all the way bloody. I mean, I understand that. I used to, I was the kind of kid that when I was little, I was very scared of horror movies. I was very scared of cat. I really kind of got later into my life. Like at 6, 7, 10, 12, I would not touch certain stuff because I was scared. But you also get you want to watch, or you want to tread that water a little bit. And these comedies that you mentioned, that's what they're good for. They kind of give you an inkling of that dimension in a safe way, where you can watch them. They're a little scary, but then you can also laugh, and you also, I think, start learning with to deal with your fright, with what's scary. That's a little bit like with fairy tales. There are ways to ease children into the nightmare of real life horrors, which we cannot control, and they just keep on growing. But we need these stories, and I really think they serve that purpose.
Yeah, no, I agree. And for you, like, what does fear mean to you? Like, we just kind of talked about it right now, but for you, what does it mean, and why do you think like us as horror fans like love being scared? Like, what do you think it is that we like so much
I
about
think
that?
I think it's, I mean, we all have different, I mean, the stuff that we each fear, we
Yeah,
all have, as human beings, we all kind of share certain fears and everything. But the thing about fear is that it becomes a mirror. No? Things that scare us is because they put you in front of something of you that you either have not fully realized, or there's still a conflict, or that itches you, that creates like a burning.
yeah,
And little by little, I think all of us have, each of us have a different definition, but it helps you a little bit to either overcome that, or to
that's true.
start dealing with that trauma, or that, scared, or something that hurts you. It eases you off on that. And also fear is, it's, I think, it's a great motor to do stuff. No,
That's true.
so fear of death, fear of age, fear of I mean, it's important to, like, also, I think, to dissect it, to kind of analyze it, because if we just let, fear define you, it either paralyzes you, or you become a monster yourself trying to defend. No, how
That's
did they
true.
say in Dune that you there's this thing of Dune that, like, about fear being the mind killer, and you
Yeah.
have to kind of like let the fear kind of let it go through you, so it
Mhm.
doesn't paralyze you. And I think
Yeah.
that's important, but it's definitely not everybody wants to deal with their fear. No, it's
Yeah.
at the beginning when I got into, professionally, the horror thing, and you be kind of comes like, yeah, everybody watch horror, let's do it. But you realize very soon that not everybody wants to deal with that. It's a little bit like with picante and hot, food. Not everybody likes it,
That's true.
and not everybody should. It's like, and you have to be very respectful of people that like it, and also to identify. For example, me as a programmer, one of the things I've learned, and when people ask me, it's like, oh, what's a good horror movie? The first thing I ask before saying anything is, what do you like, or what do you dislike? So I don't
Mhm.
go into those territories, because if they tell you, oh, I hate werewolves, or I hate torture porn, then okay, certain titles immediately go off the board.
Yeah.
And when you're a film programmer, what you want to do is bring people into cinemas, into the experience, not drive them away.
That's true.
So I think it's I mean, you start learning at the beginning. Of course, you want to just shock, but also learning how to cater those experiences to an audience becomes a very important part of the of what you do. For example, when we had Mexico Modificaron, it was important to also, uh, certain people don't want to have certain experiences or want to watch certain things. You let them know beforehand, so
Yeah.
it's a full enjoyment, and it doesn't become like a bad experience. No?
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And talking about all that and stuff like that for fear. For you, what's your like greatest fear, and have you overcome it, or are you working on it?
Working on it every single. For example, let me tell you, rats. I do not like rats.
Oh,
I
me
mean,
either.
they're nice fairy fellows and everything. I had a bad experience with a rat when I was young,
Mhm.
and they still creep me out. I've learned to, like, I see them. I don't run away now, and it's like, okay, let's keep each our distances.
Yeah.
Let's be respectful of our spaces. But yeah, I mean, they still it's
Yeah.
not that I'm gonna just like, oh, let's come have a drink with me, Mr. Rat. No,
No.
no.
Yeah. No. I'm on the
Keep your
same page as
distance.
you.
And for example, still, the first time I realized, for example, Ben la Rata Asesina, how do you call it in English? I think it's not Willard. It's the one before,
Which
the
one?
one that Michael Jackson sang the title song. It was a big rap.
I can't remember. I think
In
I know what you're
Mexico, it
talking
was
about.
Ben la Rata Asesina. The
Okay.
day that thing crossed, in front of me, I was
Uh-huh.
scared shitless for months, because I was like, you have no idea how much I suffered with that for a long, long time. So now I can, there's the rat, you can see the movies and everything, but it still like I need to work a little bit of nerve and think to deal with them. Um, and so yeah, so those are not, happy movies. You see, for example, also film films with torture. I'm not a big fan. I mean, I understand the
Okay.
genre and I
Mhm.
understand where it's coming from, but I'm not like, it's not something that makes me super happy, or like as for example, and then me bring it to the other side, werewolf movies, oof, I adore.
Yeah.
Like the transformations, and I'm a geek for that, and I thoroughly enjoy them. I'm the kind of guy that I start clapping or screaming if I'm in a cinema.
Yeah.
Just because I'm pure joy.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Yeah, I love werewolf movies, but yeah, like the torture stuff, like I Spit on Your Grave, like those where it gets to that point, I'm like that's too real. I'm like I'll stay away from those, but I see why they make them though.
No, and I think that it's terribly important. And I think,
Yes.
for example, in terms of political discourse and to understand how you know how it works, and also the extremes that shows of our humanity.
Yes.
It's incredible. The fact that so many torture porn movies were made and kind of rose after September 11th, it says a lot about that's a time when torture became legal, which is an aberration, but it did. And I think these movies kind of talked about this aberration in the culture, but that was actually happening, and we needed somehow to digest it, to kind of understand what was happening. Plus all the emotions that were unleashed after September 11, they transformed the world and transformed many of us. I was there. I mean, I was in New York when that happened. And it did. I mean, it changes your framework and how you see things. I mean, yes, definitely. So going back, I think these ideas of how we deal with certain things we cannot understand, emotions, especially emotions. I think that's a beauty part of horror films. Emotions that we can understand, finding them a story that gives them a framework so we can somehow go through them and make them more digestible, because trauma, fear, it goes beyond you. You cannot understand it. You cannot process it. And I think that this is why these movies are so important and so incredible, and they stand the test of time.
Yeah, I agree.
We keep going back to the vampires, to the monsters, to the creature features. Nature. We're afraid of nature. We've done stuff to nature. We have guilt about it. It's going to come bite us in the ass, as I'm sure it will. But there's all these stories, and we're dealing with that.
Yeah, that's why I do love like horror, like one of the few genres that like talks about different things that we're afraid to talk about, and they use film to tell those stories, like you said. And same for like history, because I don't know if you ever watched this documentary. It's called like I think Nightmares in Red, White, and Blue or something like that. It's really good.
Yes.
And it just talks about how like horror, if you go back all the way to like the 40s or whenever it started, it just starts from like you can see like history evolving. And like these horror movies touch on everything, like from Godzilla when they were about like the atomic bombs, all the way to like now dealing with like the Black Lives Matter movement. You've seen like movies like Get Out, like stuff like that. So it's really cool to see that like the evolution of horror, and also you can kind of like go down the years and it's like history, so it's really cool. That's why I love this genre a lot.
And it connects. And there's an incredible book. If people haven't looked for it, there's a gentleman called W. Scott Poole. He wrote a book. I don't have the name right now in my brain, but he talks about how after World War I, things radically changed in terms of like how deep and how deep that experience and marked the world in terms of the carnage and the horrible things that happen, and how after that all these stories of horror started erupting in cinema and literature, trying to deal with what had happened, which was kind of unfathomable, you could not understand it, you could not grasp, and how these stories started to appear to give it some sense. And it's uncanny. Also, I mean, you were talking about all these movies, and you're totally correct. But for example, Night of the Living Dead, 1968, and it touches upon so many things. All the racial things that were happening in the States in that time, and also like the first the Black hero that we have, and zombies and all social upheaval. It's like it really touched the nerve. And the fact that it came from a book that was about vampires, and then he kind of changed the vampires to the zombies from the Richard Matheson story. It also gives you this idea of how when we transpolate our fears into different contexts, it just touches the communicating vessels of all these narratives and emotions is incredible, and it's
Yeah.
beyond countries, beyond race, beyond because we all fear. No, we all feel fear. We're all,
That's true.
as different as we could be in terms of skin tones or cultures. We're all, it's the same blood, it's the same bone, and the emotions are the same. For as much as many politicians would like to tell us that it's different, or that there's some people higher up than others, it's not. We're really the same.
That's true.
And we're all bound by the same fears.
Yeah. Yeah, if you remember the book, let me know, because it sounds really interesting.
I'll dig it up in a minute. Yes.
Okay, cool. And then, kind of going back to a little bit of you, you're also an educator, right? At the Miskatonic Institute of Horror Studies. Are you still there, and how did that come up about?
When you do, like, for example, the beautiful thing about Miskatonic Institute of Horror Studies is once you do like a presentation there, or like you present something, you become an instructor, no?
Okay.
And it's a beautiful, I feel so honored to be part of Miskatonic. Here I have to say it's very important that we talk about Kirla Janice, who I think is one of the most incredible creators and a big influence in what I do. Not only meeting her, but reading her book, House of Psychotic Women, really opened my mind into what being a film programmer could be, and how you can channel your obsessions and what drives you into something creative that can not only inspire others, but put all these obsessions that we have into a useful and magical place, I have to say. And yes, like, for example, and what she did with Miskatonic, bringing people that that we're passionate about this, and giving us a place where we can talk about this, in an academic way, seriously, without the chains of like. And I don't want it to dismiss academic. I'm not in the academic realm. It's a different territory. But she organized this space where people from different walks of life, who are deeply interested in this and have knowledge, can come and share it. And it's an incredible adventure. And I think that what the Miskatonic Institute has grown now into, it's amazing. I am, as I said, not only honored, but I think it's an incredible place. And they keep doing incredible work. And as I said, I'm delighted to be there. And also, my experience there, bringing the history of Mexican horror cinema to the LA branch, and then I did a show at the Fantastic Fest, presented for Miskatonic. It opened not only many doors, but it brought me to people that are, I keep not only in touch with, but they enrich you. And, finding a place, and this probably happens to you. Sometimes because of our obsessions of what we do, you think you're like, there's not that many peers around, but then when you start finding people in other side of the world, or in other, or in places I would not imagine, that where you can share similar interests, but that also bring a different opinion or a different point of view to things that you thought of a certain way, and you grow as an individual, as a person, as a creator. It's incredible. I really treasure that. And Miskatonic is definitely that. Film festivals have also that, where you go and you find peers and people that are obsessed and crazy about certain themes, certain ideas, and you can chat. It's like it's beautiful.
Yeah, and I agree. And so is it mainly like the Miskatonic Institute? Is it mostly like online, or how does that work? Or do they have like a specific like programming? Or
Before the pandemic, it was like it had the branch in LA, New York, and London. And they were very on site. With the pandemic, I think, and it was brilliant. They brought them online, and you could actually go to, and you can still do. You can attend them, any of them, and you can have a subscription. You subscribe to it, and they do amazing work. And I think, if your listeners are curious, go check out the Miskatonic Institute of Horror Studies. Try one of the classes. Also, they've been recording them as of late, so you can. There's like a particular theme you want to go to or check out. You can rent it. A lot of the authors, of the people that present, have books, and you can check them out. And it's amazing. And also, if you haven't seen the Kirla's film Woodlands Dark and Days Bewitched, look for that. Definitely. That film on folk horror and
Oh yeah, like the
understanding.
documentary, right? Yes, I saw like the first
Yes,
half. I
it's
haven't
like
finished it.
understanding that realm of it's amazing, and the work she did on that is incredible. And also like it shows you a little bit of the incredible, masterful brain and heart that Kerla has and that she puts on her work.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And then obviously talking about Mexican horror, we got to talk about this. Is like important to me, at least for me as like a film lover. What are your thoughts on having more like Latino, representation in the horror genre, especially like in the U.S. Because obviously Mexico is a different story. But what are your thoughts?
I think it's super important, but and not only for Mexicans, but also for all cultures.
Yes.
The Mexican Latino experience in the States. I mean, it's you say Latino, no, and then
Yeah.
but the Latino umbrella is there's so many different types, no.
Yes.
Everybody who's sometimes everybody anybody who speaks Spanish ends up being Latino, and even people from Spain will tell you, oh, like suddenly they're considered Latinos, but they're not, and they say, why is this actor who's Spanish portraying Mexicans or Cubans or Puerto Ricans? And I mean, it becomes difficult to talk about because I think there's so many challenges to that, but
Yeah.
having having a variety of people in the American movies, I think it's very important. Why? Because I mean, there are the films that are watched through the world by more people. I mean, the audience the American movies have is huge, and I
Yeah.
think when people react and see, yeah, that's me or that looks like me, it's very important.
Yeah.
There's still people that diss it out and say, well, it doesn't matter, the tokenism, whatever. But I
Mhm.
think it's important. It leaves a footprint, and especially when you're young and you never see people
Yeah.
like yourself or either your ethnicity, your nation, or your accent, and suddenly you
Mhm.
see them on a big movie. It does. I think it inspires, and it's very important.
Yeah.
So I think it's important. It's a mind ground, but all this work that people are doing to not only have more Latinos in American movies, but also to give. It's nice to see people from different,
Cultures.
bone
Yeah.
structures and
Yeah.
colors in movies. It makes it more interesting. It doesn't have to be. I mean, how many years we had with like the same, types of faces in American movies. And
Yeah.
having said that, in Mexico, for example, during many years, television, we had the same. We had, you know, white people of certain type or certain blood. I
Yeah.
mean, there's
Like
not that many
colorism.
blonde people in
Yeah.
Mexico, and
Yeah.
you used to have certain types of women and men in telenovelas and everything because that was like what was expected and television executive wanted for many years, and it's
Yeah.
slowly starting to change. And Mexico's also deep. The racism in this country is like people
Yeah.
don't like to talk about it, but it's there, of course, and it
Mhm.
is so kind of under our skin that sometimes we don't even realize it, but it's there. I mean,
Yeah.
the thing with the Wakanda Forever now with the nudge, it
Yes.
just shows you all the passions that it has unleashed,
Yes.
how crazy it is. And yes, it is fantastic suddenly to watch someone, like him in a Marvel movie. It's
Exactly.
amazing. It's fantastic. But not only him, but Mayel Cadena, and all these faces. I think it's important, definitely,
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, I love that
and we
film. Just
celebrate it. Huh?
yes, yeah. That was a great film too, and great representation. I like what he stands for too, Tenoch Huerta. Like he talks a lot about the colorism in Mexican, TV
I mean, he's
and
I mean
film.
he's felt it. No, he's
Yes.
felt it. You know, right before, and he's very open about it, and he gets in a. As I said, it's once you get into that arena, it can become very problematic because you get
Yeah,
the good and the bad,
that's true.
and it's like you suddenly you have to start using the sword to like fend off attacks and everything, and it's a complex matter, but
Yeah.
it's very important, and I think cinema is such an incredible language that it needs to be enriched, and
Yes.
showing ethnicities can only make it richer, and not only showing
Exactly.
that but also using stories from different ethnic groups from different countries, different it opens your eyes and your heart to different people, different experiences, but that somehow, even if they don't look like you feel you can connect. At the end of time, at the end, cinema is not a place of ideas; it's a place of emotions. Films that really
Yeah.
work make you feel something. they're only making you think something is wrong. At least that's my personal view.
Yeah.
You need to feel something.
Yeah. I agree.
And feelings can go many places, but if you're feeling something, good.
And what would you say for you? Like, I know you mentioned a couple recommendations, but if you were to recommend a film for somebody that's getting introduced to the Mexican horror cinema, what would be a film you would recommend?
Oh, you definitely should look for Muñecos Infernales, The Curse of the Doll People, for example,
Okay.
or A Witch's Mirror. What a beautiful place. Look for Alucarda, definitely, because it will give you like a taste of that we're talking 1970 in States. It came in 77, 1977. A film that broke with so many things that Mexican cinema could do and actually dare to do, and this one went way beyond. So definitely that would be a big recommendation to go. But for example, there's like all the Tabuada films. For example, even The Wind is Afraid, which is something you can buy on Blu-ray right now, or The Scapula, which is a ghost story that are, they're more classic. They're very Mexican, but they're very elegant films, and they're visually they're top notch, and they don't suffer many of the the low budget stuff that plagues so many of our beautiful horror films. These are like prime examples of Mexican horror narratives at their prime. And I mean, they're old movies, yes, of course, but they're majestic and they work fantastic.
Yeah, like more like storytelling. Like, they're just like iconic.
Exactly, but fantastic storytelling, that goes beyond borders. And I mean, and those are that I'm giving a very classic, elegant example. But for example, we cannot mention, for example, The Brainiac, no, which is a movie plagued by many of the things that critics like to point out as being bad. But this is such a bonkers movie. It is so way out there that it just becomes better. And it's the fact that it has transcended time, the influence people. Once you see The Brainiac, you do not forget about The Brainiac.
It's like
it
ingrained.
gives you an influence on your brain and your heart. And it's just, how could they do it? How did they think they could get away with it? Well, they did. And that feeling of the bravado of going to that and saying, yeah, that's our monster. Oh, you laugh? Well, you're gonna laugh more. It's like, I'm gonna go all the way. And and it's like the Spanish Inquisition puts this guy on trial, and then he sees a comet and he says, I'm gonna come back with this comet in 400 years, and I'm gonna curse your bloodline. And he does come back when 400 years later. And it's a way out there idea, but it works. They make it work with the resources they had. They did it. And the monster, that monster is like,
I just remember the cover. Like, it always sticks with me, like the cover, even though I've only seen parts of it.
No, you should definitely please look for it, because it also deals with like it's seedy. I like that. There's like he goes to this nightclub and the prostitutes, and he attacks, but there's also the scientists, and it's perverse. It goes into dark places, and it has. There's a glee to it, which I find that irresistible also. Like, these guys knew what they were doing, and they're like, okay, we have this little space to work it, and we don't have the money, but okay, let's backdrops or back projection, and let's make illusions. I think that's very important, making illusions. I think that was something that was very important for a lot of Mexican filmmakers, creating illusions, even if you could see that it was cardboard or it was the latest thing in work. But if you take it and you kind of let yourself go into the experience, it becomes gorgeous, and you can really get lost into the narrative, which is, I think, the whole point. Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, I think Mexico was a little bit risky, like in the beginning, because I remember like Satanico Pandemonium, like that's like a non-exploitation, film with like the late Enrique Rocha. But that one, like for me, was like, oh, I can't believe they even put this, because like you said, it's like Mexico's like a Catholic, country.
But for example, you put that one next to Alucarda, and you can tell the difference between someone that kind of just say, okay, let's do an exploitation movie. What are the rules? What do we have to do? Kind of like, what would they react to? but not really understanding it or believing it. You see Alucarda on the other side. Oh my God,
Yeah,
this
it's like
was
a
someone who
different.
understood symbols, that knew what would creep out and push the envelope. I mean, he was
Yeah.
taking Goya paintings and doing them live, and it's like suddenly when it's freaky, it's freaky stuff, and
Yeah.
he pushes buttons and you react. It's like, oh shit, what am I watching? Whereas, you see the devil, as you say, the late Enrique Rocha, who's
Yeah.
gorgeous man and very elegant, but you see him with this like colonial stuff, and he's the devil. You're like,
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't convince you that much, no?
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Or
true.
you see Alucarda going one of those fits, and then you see the satanic ceremony, and you're like, all right, that shit is happening.
Yeah.
And you see one of the nuns levitate and all of that, this frenzy and blood is coming, and she's like, even the nuns that look like bandaged mummies, it's just from the costume design, it's just
Yeah. It's like way
crazy.
different. Yeah.
You're in another realm. It takes you
Yeah.
to a different universe where this might actually be happening. And I think that you mentioned that those two movies. I mean, one is from 1975, the other one's I think 74. Sure, but I mean, it's that same era, and they
Yeah.
give so different
Yeah.
experiences, and it also shows you, you know, film industry. And we cannot forget, film industry. It has to make money. There's certain, wheels that need to turn, and exploitation depends on a lot of tropes that you have to deliver certain things.
Yeah.
That's the way it works, and but certain people do it better than others, definitely.
That's true.
And they understand symbols and how you use them, and that's the beauty with like different filmmakers. There's certain filmmakers that kind of how to do it, and they do it. They follow the rules, they do it okay. And there's others that just get inspired and use those just as a starting point, and they just sometimes deliver experiences that probably not even they knew they could go so high. I think all film directors really try to go there, and
Yeah.
and they don't get there. But that's the whole point, I think, of making movies, because I'm sure nobody wants to make a shitty movie.
Yeah.
There's probably one or two, but
Yeah.
everyone wants to do something that's a good experience, something that you want to watch, and that it makes you feel something. But
Yeah.
it doesn't happen
Yeah.
all the time. That's kind of the risk, and the why you should do it, because you never know.
That's true.
Sometimes probably shitty movies ended up what could be a shitty movie on paper ended up being a jewel, and then stuff that looked on paper like a sure hit ended up doing something that was like, oh my god, what did we do? It's just there's so many things when you put so many people to do a movie. People also forget. We have this problem. We always talk about films made by one person, the director, which I know I'm complicit of that, but I'm working on an opening also. We cannot forget filmmakers, actors, so many people,
Yeah.
the talents,
The
the
writers,
passion,
everything. Yeah.
and the knowledge and the craft of so many come together to make this illusion, to create illusions. No, going back to that,
Yeah.
create the illusion. This is happening right before your eyes. This thing that is not real, it's suddenly real because you're watching it and it's making you feel something. And I think that's where the magic happens in cinema. And I know I keep using that word, but when it happens, it is because it's there.
Yeah. That's true.
It makes the intangible happen.
Yeah. And talking about that, like,
And I also that's what I love about fantasy and horror.
Yeah.
Something usually that is kind of trapped within the realm of fantasy and imagination. Suddenly, it's made tangible.
Real. Yeah. Like the characters become real. And to you, talking
And
about that,
also,
like
the crazy stuff, some things that that should not happen, or they tell you all the time
true.
they're not real, and you're like, well, they are.
And what would you say your favorite like horror villain or hero is from either in Mexican or the States?
Well, for example, I have to say, I have a deep, profound love for The Fly.
The Fly.
The Cronenberg's Fly,
yes.
to me, it's like, that stuff is like, Seth Brundle in his like sticky part when he's like, that part when Gina Davis, embraces him and he's like all sticky and rotting.
Yeah.
That shit, like, it hits me so hard at so many levels.
And I could only watch that once a year because it's like that film's so sad. Like it's like a love story,
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant. It touches on so many things, and also about relationships, because you can watch that film and has so many facets. And I think that as you grow up and you start developing, you start growing and you learn, you start seeing things on those on that film more and more and more.
Yeah.
I mean, the fear, the pregnancy stuff, the fear of like what you might be carrying, or anything. Oh my God, I think that really, it's a nerve. I mean, also from the era. I mean, and it's obvious you were very touched by that. But for example, Freddy Krueger.
Yes.
Wes Craven touched. I mean, he really touched genius on that idea.
Yeah.
No? Of like something nightmares, or something that goes through dreams, a demon, like entity. That stuff is just.
Yeah, and we all got to sleep, so it's like that's even the scariest.
Exactly, and also I think he touched on a very like teenage primordial angst that it's when you're a teenager you have it, and he touched on that, and I think that's why it's always so scary. It keeps on growing, and I mean, yes, the studios went in with it, but it's just a brilliant idea. It's a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
No? But for example, I don't know, there's so many, and I think depending on where you want to look, where you want to, there's so many stories that can captivate you. For example, there's a movie called The Changeling by Peter Medak with George C. Scott, and it's a ghost story. Oh my God, that film to me is just so elegant and deep, and I think one of the best ghost stories ever made. And it's not very popular, I mean, it's well known,
it has its following,
but it's genius. And I mean, the fact that it kind of recently got a decent Blu-ray release by Severin Films, big shout out to Severin Films. And I cannot understand why that movie is not more popular, for example.
Yeah.
Because it's brilliant, and the idea of ghosts and like energy that gets trapped, and then sorrow that is just so mighty, so intense and deep, that needs to express itself somehow, and that it gets absorbed by spaces, by a house, and that there's people that are more sensitive to that versus the other. It goes Yeah, but for example, I mean, we just talked, we were talking Mexican, those are American movies. But for example, the Japanese and ghosts, they do ghosts really, really well. And also like the whole, their culture, what they bring, the ambience, the atmospheres that they create, like the thing with the cats, like ghost cats. Oh my God. They do it like nobody. I mean, and it's very particular to their culture, and you can connect to it. And I love when I start watching stuff like that. I was like, wow. I mean, and they did it in the 60s, then they did the whole thing in the 80s. I mean, it's like, I think it's funny how each country has its cycles.
Like the little really Renaissance.
Like cycles,
The
they
little
kind of
like
get
Renaissance.
very popular.
And
they break out suddenly the whole world's like, oh my God, J-horror or Korean horror or Mexican horror, and it's like they suddenly become aware of these new flavor, and it takes a while. There's American remake, and I think it's very healthy for everybody, for the American industry, for the for each culture that gets absorbed into the mainstream, let's say like that. And eventually that interest dies down. Many years pass, nobody, and then somebody does it, or another country, and then it cycles. No?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I feel like for a time, like the last couple years, I thought like Korean and like Argentina were doing like really awesome job with like their horror films. But like I said, it takes kind of turns, like it cycles through.
And it cycles, and it's funny. Sometimes you want to keep on going, like, oh, 5 movies in a row, and if that can happen from a from a country, it'd be incredible. It's so hard to keep like an output at a certain level of intensity and quality. I mean, the people try to do that. It's just, as I said, it's a hit and miss. Like movies are they're living entities. You try to make them. You bring the best ingredients, the best people, and sometimes it works. Other times it doesn't. But the movie's there. Yeah. And you can always go back and revisit it. And I mean, that's one of the things I think when you're into horror films, one of the beauties is to open up your eyes, your spirit to different countries, different types. And
Yeah.
I love, for example, the people that are always like, I want to find more, I want to discover. That's one of the treats of doing this for me.
Yeah.
No, I tend to to not feel very trusty people. There's like, oh, I know everything, and you cannot show me. And it's like, come on, we can all. There's always something new,
That's
something that
true.
you haven't watched. There's so many movies from all over the world, and even if we've seen them, sometimes watching them again might bring us a new perspective. So it's good to keep
Yeah.
fresh and to kind of keep the an eye open and the spirit open. Once you, I think one
Yes.
of the pitfalls is when you try to get as like, oh, I know this, and you try to
You know everything.
become kind of strict and stern
Yeah.
into what is good, what is bad. It's like you need to be flexible on that because there's so many not only new things happening, but there's sometimes stuff that we don't know about.
Yeah.
It's so vast, really. Our the footprint of films is so big, and and on that note, it's so sad how many movies get lost.
Yeah.
So many, like one of the horrible things that I found when I was preparing Mexico Modificaron is certain jewels are like some are tied because of rights issues, but some are lost. Like there's no copies. Like
That's
somehow
crazy.
they're, they're lost. I mean, Alucarda. One of the negatives of Alucarda, which was one of the important ones, was burned,
Oh wow.
burned, lost forever. And we have the hope that there's one somewhere in the world,
Yeah.
but I really looked this year and I couldn't find one.
Wow.
So it's like so I also, because of that, talking about these films from the past, kind of keeping them alive in terms of, okay, we have like a screening copy, or like let's do a new copy, a new version, and a 2K, a 4K. It's important. Certain people dismiss this idea of collections and just gathering movies to keep them in the closet, but also like it's safekeeping our memory, our all these stories, passions of people that were
Yeah.
imprinted into cellular or now pixels. It, it's like with books, no? You look at a
Yeah.
book and it's like it's not alive, it's there, it looks. But then you open it and it's like the passion of the person who did it is there, and they will
Yes.
transport you, and it's magical. And I think it's important to safekeep movies, and I think that's why film archive, museum, cinematheques, anybody, like all these Blu-ray labels that do amazing work keeping stuff.
Yeah.
Last year I worked with Indicator series of a Blu-ray outfit from England, and they do tremendous job. And for example, their love for Mexican cinema and their interest now is something that I not only applaud, but I'm working with them because
Yeah.
they understood this. They understood the stuff that was there and how it needed to come out, and there's an audience for it all
Yeah.
over the world, and they're like, okay, we're gonna take time and resources to bring it out and to make people aware of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I think like Vinegar Syndrome is another one where they also
Oh yes,
do,
Vinegar
right?
Syndrome. I mean, for example,
Yes.
the '80s. I think nobody took better care of '80s horror than the stuff they did with the Familia Galindo stuff.
Yeah.
Cementerio del
Ter-
Terror,
Ladrones de Tumba too.
Ladrones de Tumbas, no?
Yeah.
Amazing stuff. Those movies probably have never looked better in their life,
I know.
ever.
The
Like
one you should try to
when
get
I
is
saw their Blu-rays,
yeah.
no, but I have to tell you, when I
Uh-huh.
saw their Blu-rays, I was
Uh-huh.
like, oh shit, I've never seen these movies because I've seen shitty copies of
Yes, or
those
like on the TV.
before, and looking at their Vinegar Syndrome, you're like, whoa. So yes, no, outstanding work. For example,
Yeah.
also in the States, there's this outfit called AGFA, the
Mhm.
American Underground Film Archive. I salute those people, how they do it and all their restoration and the care they take of the stuff. We
Yeah.
had the La Bruja, they back there from
Mhm.
right there, La Bruja,
Uh-huh.
by Chano Rueta. It was one of those jewels that it kind of had been there, and not too much love had been given to that movie, and I think it's a crucial movie. The makeup, for example, it is years beyond what like people are used to. And it was crazy. The guy who did the special effects on that, he was a wax expert. So all the
Mm.
appliances are really wax. It's not
Wow.
latex. and it looks different and great, and it's just radical. You see it, and it's like, and also it's a perverse movie, and it's like it's a revenge story with lots of heart, lots of angst, and it's against big pharma. Imagine a movie from 1954 against big pharma.
Wow.
With great special effects and like facial deformation and all these ideas of like self-worth or who am I because of how I look, which is something that right now we're like deeply sensitive to. 1954, they were doing it and they were pushing the envelope.
Wow, that's crazy.
And it's delightful. No, it's like I love to think of these movies as like time portals.
Yeah.
They bring you to that moment, to that culture, what the world looked like, how they dress at that particular point in time, and you feel that. But then we look at it from the lens of right now, and it enriches and it makes a lot of things seem new, different, and it makes you question a lot.
Yeah, because it's like still relevant.
You can see, I really dig doing this, and I think just the pleasures of growing up, of expanding, and not only the knowledge, but like your understanding of the culture of the world, and my own culture, for example. Now that I've been so deeply invested in this, I keep finding out details or information, and my idea what Mexican cinema is, how it works, all the time is growing.
That's
No,
cool.
I really like to feel now that it's an ever growing facet that keeps changing. Whenever I'm sure that if they asked me 2 years ago about this, I would probably say something different because it keeps changing.
Yeah,
and I think that's evolving. A trick. Also, you need to be open to change, to flexibility, and to evolution.
Yeah.
To stay on the same thing. Boring.
Yeah, and it's pretty like I said, inspiring and really amazing the work you're doing, because as like a film lover myself, like you said, there's some films that may never see the light of day, but even like just bringing recognition to those and sharing your knowledge, it's like it's really cool to see that. And I want to thank you again, like for taking the time to meet with me and share your knowledge and your love for the genre and keeping it alive. Is there anything else I missed that you wanted to, like, I don't know if you're working on anything new or any projects that you can share?
Well, before we go into that, I want to say what you do, for example, is so important, no? Because you're in the States, but you do not forget about your like Mexican heritage, and not only do you celebrate it through the horror thing, but also like you work as an artist, and how you record and you take Mexican horror legends and you like infuse your work with that. I think that's beautiful. Like this, from the past to the present, the thing we were talking about, time portals, no? Things you probably learn from your abuela, and you're weaving it with the woman that you are right now, and what it means probably now. And I think that's fantastic how we update these things, and we keep them alive. And I think that's fantastic. And you're like, I remember from the first time I became aware of what you were doing, I was like, whoa, that's and you can tell it from the heart and from you deeply care in this. And I think that's the best way to keep on doing this. Is like, we love doing it. We're hoping we can make a living out of
exactly
because we do this, but it's, you kind of keep it forward, and then you start finding, this person hears me, this person understands it, this person is interested, and little by little we communicate. And I think that's really beautiful, and I really want to celebrate and applaud the work you do, and the fact that you want to listen to this stuff, you want to bring it to your audience. I love it. Because I mean, let's be frank, not too many people are interested in this, and it's important to be able to have places to share this. This is my crypt, and I love being able to share this emotion from stuff that you do, from looking at tons of movies, looking at tons of books, and going to the archives, and knowing that there's an audience in the States to this that might inspire them to look for more Mexican movies, or to read more, to investigate. It's beautiful, because you never know who you're going to touch, or who you can, open a portal to someone. And I think these portals need to be shared. No?
Exactly.
So yes, that's basically. And in terms of projects, I'm working really hard on bringing some of these movies to get them some Blu-ray releases. I think, as I said, what these companies are doing in Cater, Severing, fractured visions, Arrow, Vinegar Syndrome. It's fantastic, and that they're taking an interest in Mexican movies, and if we can save them, and I really want to use that, no, save them, because they can be forgotten. They can be, as I said, some movies are lost. Negatives get lost, they get damaged, nobody cares about them. And when there's this interest and we can, bring them back to life, it's, we can offer them for the next, generation. So I'm very keen on doing that, and hopefully also bringing more of these movies to a theatrical experience. Right now that, the way we consume, we consume entertainment, it's still very early, but it's going to be a huge change, because definitely how you experience a movie from watching it in your home or your cell phone to a theater, it is very different. So anytime we can make a theatrical experience to one of these movies, it's something we need to do, or something I will work hard to do. So
that's cool.
Those are I have a couple of book projects that I'm working very hard on those, but those are very, very hard. The discipline.
Yeah.
But yes, we're slowly working on those that are hopefully will come out next year.
Perfect. That's
so
cool.
We can share not only my crazy energy
your knowledge
on live presentations and recorded, but also hopefully on a written form.
That's really exciting. Congrats on that. Yeah, like keep me posted, and then anyway, like I said, I can support you or anything like that. Let me know. Like I'm always down to like help and spread the word.
Thank you so very much. As I said, I'm delighted and honored to be sharing all these stories with you.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to another episode of Nightmare on Sedgwick Avenue. If you like this episode, go ahead and subscribe, and also follow Aullidos Panteoneros. His Instagram and all that, I'll have it on the description. So, yeah, thank you, guys.